When a prince knelt before a mocked orphan girl at the royal banquet, the entire room erupted in laughter. But when the queen stepped forward with tears streaming down her face, no one was prepared for the secret that would silence them all. The crystal wineglass slipped from Mercy's trembling hands, and time seemed to slow as expensive red liquid splashed across the designer gown of Mrs. Becaire, one of Lagos's most influential socialites. The chatter in the Nwankwo mansion's grand ballroom died instantly. "You useless girl." Mrs. Gloria Nwankwo's voice cut through the silence like a whip. "I should have known better than to let you serve at my party." Mercy's knees hit the marble floor as she frantically tried to clean the stain with her bare hands, her apologies tumbling out in broken whispers. Around her, guests whispered and pointed, their laughter barely concealed behind manicured hands. She could hear every cruel word: orphan girl, housemaid, no breeding at all. "Mama, I told you she would embarrass us," Blessing Nwankwo sneered from across the room, her voice dripping with satisfaction. She stood surrounded by her friends, all of them looking at Mercy with identical expressions of disgust. "Street rats don't belong around decent people." Mercy kept her head down, her eyes burning with unshed tears. This was her life, 19 years of being reminded she was nothing, nobody, unwanted. She'd been working for the Nwankwos for 3 years since Pastor Michael found her the position, enduring their cruelty because she had nowhere else to go. Every day brought new humiliations, but she endured because the alternative was the street. Mrs. Becaire stood up, examining her ruined gown with theatrical horror. "This dress cost 2 million naira, imported from Milan." "I'm so sorry, ma'am," Mercy whispered, still scrubbing uselessly at the stain. "It was an accident." "Please, I didn't mean." "Accidents are for careless people," Mrs. Becaire interrupted coldly. "And careless people shouldn't be allowed to serve in respectable homes." Mrs. Gloria's face had turned an ugly shade of red. She grabbed Mercy by the arm, her nails digging into skin. "Get out of my sight," she hissed, her breath hot with fury. "And you're paying for that dress from your salary. All of it. I don't care if it takes you 3 years. 3 years. Mercy's small salary would be gone entirely. She wouldn't be able to save anything for school, wouldn't be able to send money to Pastor Michael's orphanage, wouldn't be able to buy the books she studied from in secret. But she didn't protest. She'd learned long ago that protesting only made things worse. As Mercy stumbled toward the kitchen, clutching her throbbing arm, she didn't notice the tall figure standing near the terrace entrance, watching everything with intense dark eyes. Prince Adewale Adeyemi had been observing the party from the periphery, fulfilling a social obligation to friends of his family. He'd been bored, counting the minutes until he could politely leave, when the crash happened. But something about the young woman's quiet dignity, even as tears streamed down her face, struck something deep within him. The way she'd apologized not with excuses but with genuine remorse. The way she'd tried to fix her mistake immediately, even though it was clearly hopeless. The way she'd endured humiliation without fighting back or making a scene. There was a grace in her suffering that felt almost familiar, though he couldn't explain why. He'd seen plenty of servants in his life. He'd witnessed countless mistakes at royal functions. But he'd never seen someone maintain such dignity while being torn apart by cruelty. Most people either crumbled or fought back. This girl did neither. She simply bore it, as if she'd long ago accepted that this was her lot in life. It bothered him more than it should. "Your Highness," Solomon, his aide, appeared at his elbow. "We should leave. This party is beneath your attention." Adewale nodded slowly, but his eyes remained fixed on the kitchen door where the girl had disappeared. "Solomon, find out who that girl is. Everything about her. But discreetly. I don't want anyone knowing I'm asking." Solomon raised an eyebrow but knew better than to question his prince. "Of course, Your Highness." As they left the mansion, Adewale couldn't shake the image of the girl on her knees, apologizing for an accident, accepting blame for a ruined dress she could never afford, carrying herself with more grace than anyone else in that room full of wealthy, educated people. He didn't know why it mattered. He didn't know why he couldn't stop thinking about her eyes, dark and deep, holding oceans of pain but no bitterness. He only knew that something about her felt important. Like a puzzle piece his soul recognized, even though his mind hadn't seen the full picture yet. The morning sun blazed over Balagan Market as Mercy navigated through the crowded stalls, her small purse containing barely enough for the groceries Mrs. Gloria demanded. She was mentally calculating prices, trying to figure out how to stretch her meager allowance, when angry shouts drew her attention to a cluster of teenage boys surrounding a small child. "Give it back!" the little boy cried, reaching desperately for a dented tin can the boys were tossing between them like a toy. "You're begging money," one of them taunted, holding it high above the child's head. "Consider it a tax for using our street, small boy." The other boys laughed, shoving the child between them. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old, his clothes torn and dirty, his eyes filling with tears of frustration and fear. Mercy's feet moved before her mind could counsel caution. "Leave him alone." The boys turned, surprised, then burst into mocking laughter. "And who's going to stop us?" "You." The tallest one looked her up and down with contempt. "Mind your business, housemaid." "No, I'm going to give you something better." Mercy reached into her purse with trembling fingers and pulled out her carefully saved 300 naira, money she'd been saving for months from her tiny allowance. It was supposed to buy her a used textbook she'd seen at a stall last week. But looking at the boy's frightened face, she knew what she had to do. "Take this and leave him alone." The boys snatched the money and scattered into the crowd, counting their unexpected gain. The little boy looked up at Mercy with tear-filled eyes as she helped him gather his scattered coins, counting them carefully to make sure none had been lost. "Thank you, sister," he whispered. Mercy's throat tightened. She used her remaining money to buy him akara and bread from a nearby vendor, watching as he ate hungrily. She knew she'd face Mrs. Gloria's wrath for coming home without the full grocery list, but some things mattered more than avoiding punishment. "That was kind of you." Mercy spun around to find a tall man in simple jeans and a t-shirt watching her with warm, intense eyes. There was something oddly familiar about his face, something that made her heart skip, but she'd never seen him before. He was handsome in a way that made her suddenly conscious of her faded housemaid's uniform and worn slippers. "It was nothing," she murmured, suddenly self-conscious, looking down at her feet. "It was everything to that child." He smiled, and it transformed his serious face entirely, making him look younger and approachable. "I'm Whale. And you are?" "Mercy." She hesitated, waiting for the usual questions about her family, her background, the questions that always led to pity or contempt. But he just smiled again. "Mercy. It suits you." They talked while she finished her shopping, Whale asking questions about her life with genuine interest that felt foreign to her. He didn't talk down to her or look at her uniform with disdain. He listened when she spoke, really listened, as if her words mattered. She found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. Her dreams of finishing school someday, of becoming a teacher so she could help children like that little boy, of having a family who actually wanted her. "Why do you want to be a teacher?" he asked, helping her carry her basket through the crowded market. "Because every child deserves to know they matter," Mercy said quietly. "That they have potential, regardless of where they started. I never had anyone tell me that growing up. I want to be that person for other children." Whale stopped walking and looked at her with such intensity that she felt her cheeks grow warm. "Why are you kind to everyone except yourself?" he asked quietly. The question caught her completely off guard. No one had ever asked her something like that before. Before she could find an answer, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, completely out of place in the busy market. A man in a dark suit stepped out, speaking urgently into a phone. "Sir, we need to leave. Your schedule." Whale looked reluctant, almost frustrated. "I have to go." "But Mercy, don't give up on those dreams. Promise me." "I promise," she whispered, not understanding why this stranger's opinion mattered so much to her. As the SUV drove away, Mercy stood holding her half-empty basket, watching until it disappeared into Lagos traffic. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just shifted in some imperceptible but profound way. She didn't know that the man she'd just met was Prince Adewale Adeyemi, heir to the throne. She didn't know that he was driving away thinking about her smile, her kindness, her dreams, and the strange pull he felt toward this housemaid who gave away her last money to feed a hungry child. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and seen something worth knowing. The announcement blared from every radio station and television screen across Lagos. Prince Adewale Adeyemi was to choose a bride within 3 months, and the royal family would be hosting a series of events for eligible young women from respectable families. In the Nwankwo mansion, chaos erupted. "This is it, blessing!" Mrs. Gloria shrieked with excitement, her voice carrying through every room of the house. "This is your chance to become royalty. We'll get you the best dresses, the best makeup artists, the best hairstylists, the best of everything. You're going to be a princess." Blessing squealed, already imagining herself in a crown and royal robes, already practicing her wave to imaginary crowds. "Mama, do you think the prince will like me?" "Like you. He'll love you. You're beautiful, educated, from a good family. You're everything a prince could want." Mercy scrubbed the bathroom tiles harder, trying to ignore the celebration happening downstairs. She told herself the strange heaviness in her chest was just exhaustion, not disappointment. What did it matter to her who the prince married? Princes didn't marry housemaids. Fairy tales weren't real. But the face of the kind stranger from the market kept floating into her mind. Whale. She'd spent the past week thinking about him more than she cared to admit, wondering if she'd ever see him again, if he'd meant any of the encouraging things he'd said, or if he'd just been kind the way people are sometimes kind to stray dogs, a momentary compassion that meant nothing beyond the moment. "Mercy!" Mrs. Gloria's screech echoed up the stairs, sharp enough to make her flinch. "Get down here now." Mercy abandoned her cleaning and hurried downstairs, her heart already racing with anxiety. When Mrs. Gloria used that tone, punishment usually followed. She found the entire household assembled in the living room, surrounded by shopping bags, fabric samples, and glossy magazines showing royal weddings from around the world. The television played footage of Prince Adewale on repeat, at charity events, at state functions, always looking composed and distant. Mercy's heart stopped. The man on the screen was Whale. Her Whale from the market. Except he wasn't hers, and he wasn't just Whale. He was Prince Adewale Adeyemi, heir to the throne, the most eligible bachelor in Nigeria. The stranger who'd asked about her dreams was royalty. "For the next 3 months, your only job is making sure Blessing looks perfect," Mrs. Gloria announced, oblivious to Mercy's shock. "You'll wake up at 4 a.m. to prepare her skin treatments. You'll steam and iron every outfit twice. You'll carry her bags at every event. You'll make sure her makeup is flawless, her hair is perfect, her shoes are polished. And if you mess up even once, you're out on the street. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Mercy whispered, unable to tear her eyes from the television screen. Blessing smirked from the couch, already imagining herself in Mercy's place on the prince's arm. "Don't worry, Mercy. When I'm princess, maybe I'll let you clean the palace toilets. At least then you'll have moved up in the world." Her friends laughed, the sound cruel and casual. To them, Mercy was just part of the furniture, something to use and mock in equal measure. That night, alone in her tiny room behind the kitchen, Mercy let herself cry for the first time in months. Not because of Blessing's cruelty, she was used to that. Not because of Mrs. Gloria's threats, those were nothing new. But because for one brief, shining moment in the market, a stranger had made her feel like she mattered. Like her dreams were valid. Like she was worth listening to. And now she knew it had all been impossible from the start. He was a prince. She was an orphan housemaid. They existed in different worlds, might as well be different species. Whatever kindness he'd shown her had been just that. Kindness. Nothing more. Nothing that could ever lead anywhere. She clutched her thin pillow and tried not to think about his smile, his questions, the way he'd looked at her like she was someone worth knowing. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, in a palace across the city, Solomon was presenting Prince Adewale with a full report. Mercy Williams, age 19, orphan, housemaid to the Nwankwo family, found as an infant at Pastor Michael's church, no known family, no prospects, no hope of ever being anything more than what she was. And the prince was staring at her photo, a grainy image Solomon had obtained from the church records, with an expression that made his aide very, very nervous. "Your Highness," Solomon said carefully, "you understand that a girl like this, from her background, it would be impossible. The kingdom would never accept." "I didn't ask for your opinion on what's possible," Adewale interrupted quietly, his eyes never leaving Mercy's photograph. "I asked you to find out who she is." Solomon fell silent, recognizing the tone. It was the same tone the late king had used when he'd announced he would marry Queen Judith despite her family's lower status. The Adeyemi men, it seemed, had a habit of making impossible choices. And Solomon had a sinking feeling that his prince was about to make one now. Mercy sat in the car outside the Royal Hotel, her stomach growling as she watched Lagos's elite stream into the charity gala in their designer gowns and expensive jewelry. Mrs. Gloria had made her skip breakfast and lunch to help Blessing prepare for this moment, and now she was expected to wait in the parking lot for hours in case Blessing needed anything. Through the car window, she could see the glittering lights of the ballroom, hear the faint music drifting out. She wondered if Prince Adewale was inside. She'd spent 2 weeks trying not to think about him, trying to convince herself that the connection she'd felt in the market had been one-sided, imaginary. She was nearly asleep, her head resting against the window, when the car door flew open so violently she almost fell out. Blessing stood there, her face purple with rage, her designer gown covered in brown stains that looked like coffee. "Some idiot bumped into me in the bathroom and I fell against the sink," she shrieked, her voice shrill enough to draw stares from passing guests. "The gala is starting in 10 minutes and I look like trash. I'm so sorry, but what can I? Switch clothes with me. Now." Blessing's eyes were wild with desperation and fury. Mercy's eyes widened in shock. "But I can't wear your. Now, Mercy, or I swear to God, you'll be sleeping on the street tonight. Do you hear me? On the street." Blessing was already yanking at the zipper of her gown, not caring that they were in a parking lot where anyone could see. Mercy's hands trembled as she complied, knowing resistance was futile. 5 minutes later, she stood in the hotel bathroom wearing Blessing's stunning emerald gown, silk and beading that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. The dress fit her perfectly, almost as if it had been made for her body. The emerald color made her skin glow, brought out the depth of her dark eyes. For one moment, looking at her reflection, Mercy let herself imagine she was someone else. Someone who belonged in a dress like this. Someone who could walk into that ballroom and not feel like an imposter. Blessing, now wearing Mercy's simple housemaid uniform, had stormed off to sit in the car, refusing to be seen in such rags. "Stay in the bathroom until I text you," she'd commanded. "Don't you dare let anyone see you in my dress." "I'll just wait here until she's ready to leave," Mercy whispered to herself, smoothing down the silk nervously. But fate had other plans. A large group of guests pushed into the bathroom, their laughter and chatter forcing Mercy out into the corridor. She tried to find a quiet corner, somewhere she could make herself invisible, but another wave of guests swept her along like a current, carrying her right into the main ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. An orchestra played softly in the corner, the music elegant and refined. Everywhere she looked, she saw wealth and power. Government officials, business magnates, foreign dignitaries, all gathered to celebrate charity while drinking champagne that cost more than her monthly salary. And standing at the center of it all, shaking hands with dignitaries, was Wale. Except he wasn't Wale. He was Prince Adewale Adeyemi, resplendent in traditional royal attire with a gold chain of office across his chest, looking every inch the future king. Mercy's heart stopped. She needed to leave. Now. Before anyone noticed her. Before she caused another disaster. She turned to flee, her only thought to get back to the parking lot, to safety, to invisibility. But it was too late. His eyes had found her across the crowded room, and the look of recognition and joy that crossed his face made several heads turn to see what had caught the prince's attention. The conversations around him faltered. People stared. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd like wind through grass. Prince Adewale didn't seem to notice or care. He crossed the ballroom floor as if drawn by an invisible string, ignoring the gasps and whispers, ignoring his mother's sharp intake of breath, ignoring the advisor who tried to grab his arm. He stopped directly in front of Mercy, his eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her knees weak. Then, with a slight bow that sent shock waves through the watching crowd, he extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" The room went completely silent. The orchestra stopped playing. Every eye turned to stare at the unknown girl in the emerald dress, standing frozen before the Crown Prince of Lagos, her face a mixture of terror and disbelief. Somewhere in the crowd, Mrs. Gloria's friend gasped in recognition. Isn't that the Nwankwo's housemaid?" The whisper spread like wildfire. Mercy heard it, felt the weight of hundreds of judging eyes, knew she should run, should apologize, should disappear. But Prince Adewale's hand remained extended, his eyes never leaving her face, and somehow, despite every logical thought screaming at her to flee, Mercy found herself placing her trembling hand in his. As he led her onto the dance floor, she heard the first cruel laugh. Then another. Within seconds, the room buzzed with mockery barely concealed behind expensive jewelry and practiced smiles. The prince didn't seem to hear any of it. He only heard the music as it started again, only saw Mercy's face as they began to dance, only felt the rightness of this moment even as Lagos society began tearing her reputation to shreds. The video went viral within hours. Someone had recorded the entire dance on their phone, and by dawn, it had been shared thousands of times. "Prince dances with nobody. Is this our future queen?" The comments section was a cesspool of cruelty. "Who does this girl think she is? Gold digger alert. The prince needs to be protected from social climbers like this. She probably planned the whole thing." By morning, Mercy's face was everywhere. On blogs, on social media, on morning talk shows where hosts debated whether the prince had been bewitched or was simply naive. Lagos society had rendered its verdict. She was a calculating opportunist, a social climber, a conniving orphan who'd somehow tricked the prince. Mrs. Gloria's fury was volcanic. She dragged Mercy from her room at dawn, screaming loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. "You've humiliated this family," she shrieked, pulling Mercy by her hair across the compound. "Blessing was supposed to catch the prince's attention, not you. You useless, scheming witch." Mercy tried to explain that she hadn't planned any of it, that the prince had approached her, but Mrs. Gloria wasn't interested in truth. Her hand connected with Mercy's face once, twice, 3 times. The metallic taste of blood filled Mercy's mouth. "You're locked in here until I decide what to do with you." Mrs. Gloria dragged her to the servants' quarters, a small room behind the kitchen with a broken window, a thin mat on the floor, and walls that seemed to close in during the heat of the day. The door slammed. The lock clicked with finality. Mercy curled up on the mat, her body aching from Mrs. Gloria's blows, her heart aching from something deeper. For a few magical minutes on that dance floor, Prince Adewale had talked to her softly, asking about her week, her dreams, if she'd bought that textbook yet. He'd known exactly who she was all along. He'd remembered their conversation in the market, every detail. "Why would a prince care about someone like me?" she whispered to the darkness, touching her swollen lip gingerly. Miles away, in the royal palace, Prince Adewale was asking Solomon a very different question. Find out everything about Mercy Williams's background. Where she came from, who her parents were, why she was abandoned. Everything. Solomon hesitated, glancing at the door where Queen Judith had just exited after a furious confrontation with her son. "Your Highness, your mother has already made her feelings clear. She believes this girl is unsuitable, that you're risking." "I don't care what anyone thinks." Adewale's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "Solomon, when I talked to her in the market, I didn't tell her I was a prince. I was just." "Whale." And she treated me like I was just a man. Not royalty, not a title, not a means to an end. Just a person worth talking to. But Your Highness, there's something about her. Adewale stood at the window, looking out over Lagos. When I look at her, it's like I'm supposed to know her. Like she matters in a way I can't explain. Like fate is trying to tell me something important, and I'm too blind to see what it is. Solomon bowed and left, his mind already working through how to conduct this investigation discreetly. Within hours, he'd found Pastor Michael and heard the story. Mercy had been left on the church steps 19 years ago, wrapped in an expensive blanket that had long since disintegrated, with only a small golden locket around her neck. "I've kept it safe all these years," Pastor Michael said, pulling out a small wooden box from his desk drawer, hoping someday her family might return for her. They never did. Solomon held the locket, studying the delicate engraving in the dim light of the pastor's office. It was real gold, expensive, the kind of jewelry only the very wealthy could afford. 2 initials were engraved on the front. J.A. J.A. The initials seemed to whisper something important, but Solomon couldn't quite grasp what. He photographed the locket from every angle, thanked the pastor, and left. Meanwhile, Prince Adewale made a phone call to the University of Lagos admissions office. "I need you to prepare a full scholarship for a student," he said quietly. "Mercy Williams. Full tuition, books, housing allowance. Everything she needs. Anonymous donor. Make sure she gets the letter next week." The admissions director agreed immediately. One didn't refuse a request from the Crown Prince. Adewale hung up and stared at his phone, at the viral video of their dance that someone had sent him. In it, he could see what the camera had captured, but he hadn't noticed in the moment. The way Mercy had looked at him with wonder and fear, the way she'd held herself with dignity even as people laughed, the way she'd trusted him enough to dance despite knowing she was being mocked. He didn't know that Mercy, locked in her tiny room, was crying herself to sleep, believing she'd never see him again, that their brief connection had been nothing but a fantasy that would cost her everything. He didn't know that his mother, Queen Judith, had just heard about the viral video and was, at that very moment, preparing to end whatever foolishness her son had started, by any means necessary. And neither of them knew that the locket Solomon held in his hands, the one with the initials J.A., was about to unravel a secret that would change all their lives forever. A secret that had been buried for 20 years. A secret that would explain why Prince Adewale felt that inexplicable pull toward a housemaid he barely knew. A secret that would turn mockery into silence. Prince Adewale showed up at Balogun Market the following Tuesday morning, wearing the same simple clothes he'd worn when he first met Mercy. He'd left Solomon and his security detail in the car against their strenuous protests, insisting he needed to do this alone. He found her buying vegetables at the same stall where they'd first talked, her face partially hidden by a scarf, her movements quick and furtive as if she was trying to become invisible to the world. "You're avoiding me," he said gently, appearing beside her. Mercy jumped, nearly dropping her basket. When she saw who it was, her eyes filled with tears that she blinked back furiously. "Your Highness, you shouldn't be here. Please. The whole city is talking. I'm nobody. You're a prince. This is wrong. There's nothing wrong about seeing someone who makes me want to be a better person. You don't understand." Her voice cracked with desperation, with fear. "Mrs. Gloria beat me. People are saying terrible things about me, that I'm a witch, that I seduced you, that I'm trying to trap you. I've ruined your reputation, destroyed your image. Please, just forget you ever met me." "My reputation?" Adewale's laugh was bitter, startling her. "Mercy, do you know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who gave her last money to feed a hungry child. Someone who apologizes for accidents that weren't her fault. Someone who dreams of teaching children despite having every reason to be angry at the world. Someone who held her head high while being mocked by people who don't have a tenth of her character. That's real royalty. Not the gold I wear or the title I inherited." Tears streamed down Mercy's face now, unchecked. "But they're laughing at you because of me. Your own mother. My mother doesn't know you. None of them know you. But I do. And I trust what I see more than what they say. Someone's phone camera flashed nearby. Neither of them noticed at first, but by evening, a new video was trending across Lagos. Prince stalking housemaid at market, royal family in crisis. The hashtags multiplied like a virus spreading through social media. Hashtag gold digger. Hashtag know your place. Hashtag orphan princess. Hashtag prince bewitched. Comment after comment mocked Mercy, questioned her motives, predicted her downfall with gleeful cruelty. Think pieces appeared on news sites about the dangers of social climbing, about gold diggers targeting wealthy men, about the prince's desperate need for protection from those people. Mercy read them all that night on Blessing's old phone that barely had any data left. Each comment was a knife to her heart. Each laugh was a fresh wound. By midnight, she was curled up on her thin mat in the servants' quarters, shaking with silent sobs, wondering how much more she could possibly endure before she simply broke apart. Queen Judith summoned her son the next morning before dawn. Adewale found her in the private sitting room, her face composed but her eyes flashing with barely controlled fury. This ends now, Adewale. You will not see that girl again. Mother, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. The Queen's voice was ice wrapped in steel. She's a nobody with nothing. No family, no education, no prospects, no future. You're the Crown Prince of Lagos, heir to a throne that has stood for centuries. This infatuation is embarrassing our family, undermining your authority, making you look like a lovesick fool. I don't care what. Well, you should care. Queen Judith stood abruptly, her composure cracking. Do you know what the council is saying? That you're unfit to rule. That your judgment is fatally compromised. That perhaps your younger cousin should be considered as heir instead. Adewale went very still, his jaw tightening. They wouldn't dare. They would and they are. Because you're acting like an irrational child over a housemaid. She softened slightly, reaching for his hand with something almost like genuine concern. My son, I know you think you feel something for this girl. But it's not real. It's infatuation, attraction to someone different, perhaps even guilt about her circumstances. But it's not love, and it's certainly not worth your throne. But Adewale wasn't listening anymore. He was thinking about Mercy's face when she talked about her dreams in the market. He was thinking about the way she'd looked in that emerald gown, like she'd been born to wear it, like royalty had always been in her blood. He was thinking about the strange, inexplicable pull he felt toward her, as if fate itself was trying to tell him something crucial, something his mind couldn't quite grasp but his heart understood on some deep, instinctive level. I won't stop seeing her, he said quietly, meeting his mother's eyes with unwavering resolve. The Queen's eyes flashed with anger, and something else. Something that looked almost like panic, like genuine fear. Then you leave me no choice. I will handle this myself. By any means necessary. What does that mean, Mother? It means that girl will be gone from Lagos by the end of the week. I'll pay her off, relocate her far away where she can't embarrass this family anymore. But she will be gone. You can't. Watch me. Queen Judith swept from the room, leaving Adewale standing frozen, his mind racing with scenarios, none of them good. What neither of them knew was that Solomon had just made a discovery that would change absolutely everything. He'd shown the locket to the royal family's longtime jeweler, an old man who'd served 3 generations of the Adeyemi family faithfully. The jeweler had gone pale, his hands trembling as he turned the locket over and over. Your Highness, the old man had whispered, his voice shaking with the weight of recognition. I made this locket myself. 20 years ago. For Queen Judith. It was a christening gift for her child. The royal family was told the baby died at birth. Solomon stood in his office now, staring at the locket with growing horror and understanding. The initials J.A. Judith Adeyemi. If Mercy was wearing the Queen's locket, if the baby hadn't actually died. His hands shook as he reached for his phone to call Prince Adewale immediately. But before he could dial, the phone rang with an incoming call. It was Pastor Michael, his voice tight with urgency and fear. Solomon, the Queen is here at my church with 2 men who look like royal security. She's demanding to see the locket. She says if I don't give it to her immediately, she'll have me arrested. What should I do? Pastor Michael's hands trembled as he placed the golden locket on his desk. Queen Judith, who'd arrived unannounced in an unmarked car with tinted windows, stared at it as if she'd seen a ghost rise from the grave. I came to warn you, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger and something else, something that trembled beneath the surface. Your ward needs to stay away from my son. I'll pay for her education, find her a better job, give her money to start fresh somewhere else. Anything. But she cannot continue this association with Adewale. The Queen paced his small office, her expensive shoes clicking on the worn tile floor. She looked out of place here, surrounded by simple wooden furniture and faded religious posters, a queen in a house of humble worship. Your Majesty, with respect, Mercy hasn't done anything wrong. She didn't seek out your son. He approached her. I don't care who approached whom. Queen Judith's voice rose, then she caught herself, forcing her composure back into place. The point is this needs to end. Today. Now. I will not allow my son to throw away his future for some. She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes had fixed on the locket lying on the pastor's desk, and all the color drained from her face as if someone had physically struck her. Where did you get this? The question came out as barely a whisper, her voice strangled with sudden emotion. It was around Mercy's neck when she was left at my church. 19 years ago, Your Majesty. The Queen's legs buckled. Pastor Michael rushed forward to help her to a chair before she collapsed entirely. Your Majesty, are you unwell? Should I call for medical? Tell me everything, she commanded, though her voice shook and tears were already streaming down her carefully made-up face. Tell me everything about that night. Every detail. Don't leave anything out. Pastor Michael sat down across from her and explained carefully. A rainy evening in March, almost 20 years ago now. He'd been locking up the church after evening prayers when he heard a car engine. By the time he reached the front steps, a dark luxury vehicle was pulling away. And there, on the steps, was a bundle wrapped in expensive fabric. A baby girl, maybe a few days old, crying but healthy. And around her tiny neck was this locket. Queen Judith's hands covered her face as she sobbed with a grief that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. They told me my baby died, she choked out between gasps. I was 19, barely more than a child myself. My family said he was beneath me, that I was throwing away my future for some man who would never amount to anything. When I got pregnant, they were furious. They sent me away to a private clinic, wouldn't let Raymond come with me. I gave birth alone, surrounded by strangers. And they told me she was stillborn, that it was God's will, that I needed to forget and move on with my life. Your Majesty. Pastor Michael's own eyes filled with sympathetic tears. But she wasn't dead, was she? The Queen's eyes blazed through her tears with sudden, terrible understanding. My family, my own blood, they took my baby. They took her and abandoned her at your church like she was nothing, like she was trash to be discarded. And I've spent 20 years mourning a child who was alive all along. 20 years. While she was suffering, being treated like she had no value, I was living in luxury thinking she was dead. She grabbed the locket with shaking fingers, opening it carefully. Inside was a tiny photograph, so faded with age it was barely visible, of a young woman holding a newborn baby with infinite tenderness. The woman was unmistakably a younger Queen Judith, her face soft with maternal love. I need to know for certain, she whispered, clutching the locket to her chest. Pastor, I need you to help me arrange a DNA test. Discreetly. Secretly. No one can know about this, especially not Adewale or Mercy. Not until I'm absolutely sure. I can't give her hope and then take it away if I'm wrong. But Your Majesty, if she truly is your daughter, then I've failed her in every way a mother can fail a child. Fresh tears cascaded down her face, ruining her makeup, but she didn't seem to care. She's been suffering for 19 years while I lived in a palace, never knowing. She's been called an orphan, treated like she's worthless, beaten and humiliated, and all along she was my daughter. She was a princess. How does a mother come back from that? How do I face her knowing I let this happen? Pastor Michael promised to help arrange everything discreetly. As the Queen prepared to leave, gathering her composure like armor, she turned back one more time at the door. Watch over her, Pastor. Keep her safe. And please don't let her know anything yet. I need to be certain before I destroy whatever fragile hope she might have about who her family is. I won't give her false hope only to break her heart. The pastor nodded solemnly, but his heart was heavy with a truth he couldn't share. Because he knew something the Queen didn't yet understand. Prince Adewale wasn't just being kind to Mercy. He was falling in love with her, or what he thought was love. And if Mercy turned out to be his sister, that revelation would shatter both their hearts in ways that might never fully heal. The Queen left through the back entrance, and Pastor Michael sat alone in his office, holding the locket, praying that God would give them all the strength for what was coming. The DNA results would take a week to process. Queen Judith spent that agonizing time secretly watching Mercy from a distance, her heart breaking a little more with each observation, each glimpse into the life her daughter had been forced to live. She hired a private investigator to document Mercy's daily routine, and the reports came back like daggers to her heart. She watched through tinted car windows as her daughter scrubbed floors at the Nwankwo mansion on her hands and knees. She saw the way Mrs. Gloria spoke to Mercy like she was worthless, less than human. She watched Mercy share her small lunch with a street vendor's hungry child, going without food herself so another could eat. She watched her daughter read a tattered textbook by candlelight in her tiny room late into the night, still chasing dreams despite a world that told her she deserved nothing. And with each moment, with each secret observation, Queen Judith saw herself reflected back. The same dark, intelligent eyes. The same graceful way of moving even when exhausted. The same stubborn dignity in the face of cruelty. The same quiet strength that refused to break no matter how much pressure was applied. The resemblance wasn't just physical. It was in every gesture, every expression, every small act of kindness. How had she not seen it before? How had she looked at Mercy at that gala and not recognized her own blood, her own flesh? But there was a bigger, more immediate problem developing. Prince Adewale wasn't backing down from his pursuit of Mercy. Despite his mother's explicit orders, despite the council's warnings, despite the media storm that grew worse by the day, he'd visited Mercy 3 more times. The footage was everywhere. The prince at the market, the prince at the church, the prince even showing up at the Nwankwo mansion claiming to need household staff recommendations. The media frenzy had reached a fever pitch that threatened to destabilize the entire royal household. Political advisors warned in urgent memos that the prince's reputation was beyond repair. Foreign dignitaries were calling, questioning whether the prince was fit to lead. Business partners were pulling back from royal-endorsed projects. The council was in emergency sessions daily. "Mother, I love her," Adewale announced one evening, walking into her chambers without knocking, his face set with determination. "I don't care about her status, her background, or what anyone thinks. At the royal banquet next week, I'm going to declare my intentions publicly. I'm going to ask her to marry me. And if you won't accept her, if the council won't accept her, then I'll renounce my title. I'll give up everything." Queen Judith felt her heart physically tear in two, the pain so acute she almost gasped. She couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet, not until she had absolute confirmation. But she couldn't let him declare romantic love for his own sister either. The very thought made her feel ill. "Adewale, please, just wait a few more days." "I've waited long enough, Mother." His voice was gentle but immovable. "Mercy makes me believe in goodness again. When I'm with her, I understand what it means to be truly noble. She's taught me more about real royalty in a few weeks than I learned in 28 years of palace life. Not because of birth, but because of character. Because of who she chooses to be despite everything she's endured." That night, alone in her chambers, Queen Judith paced back and forth until her feet ached, the locket clutched in her trembling hands like a talisman. Pastor Michael had called earlier with news. The DNA results had arrived early, processed on an emergency basis. She didn't need to open the envelope to know the truth. Her heart, a mother's heart that had mourned for 20 years, had already told her. But she opened it anyway with shaking hands, and the clinical words confirmed what her soul had known from the moment she'd seen that locket. 99.9% probability of maternal match. Biologically, conclusively, scientifically certain. Mercy Williams was her daughter. The baby she'd mourned for 2 decades. Princess Mercy Adeyemi had been alive all along, suffering while her mother lived in luxury and comfort, not knowing, never suspecting. The Queen sat down heavily on her bed and wept, for the 20 years she'd lost and could never reclaim. For the birthdays she'd missed, the milestones she'd never celebrated. For the suffering her daughter had endured, the beatings, the humiliation, the constant message that she was worthless, while her real mother lived just miles away in a palace. For the terrible, cruel irony that her son had fallen deeply in love with his sister without either of them knowing the truth. And she realized with dawning horror that at the royal banquet in just 3 days, she was going to have to break both their hearts to save them from a terrible mistake. She would have to reveal the truth. She would have to shatter Adewole's perception of his feelings. She would have to watch Mercy's face as she learned that the mother who'd abandoned her was standing right in front of her, wearing a crown and royal robes, having lived in comfort while her daughter suffered unspeakable indignities. The only question was how to do it. How to reveal this devastating truth without destroying her daughter all over again, without breaking what little spirit Mercy had left after 19 years of being told she was nothing. Queen Judith held the DNA report and the locket together in her hands and prayed for strength, for wisdom, for the right words to heal instead of harm. Because in 3 days, everything would change. And she had no idea if her family would survive the truth. The royal banquet hall glittered with crystal and gold. Every influential person in Lagos had gathered to see what Prince Adewole would announce. Rumors had spread that he planned to name his chosen bride. Mercy stood in the corner in her housemaid uniform, holding Blessing's purse while her employer preened among the eligible young women. Mrs. Gloria had forced her to come, apparently enjoying the irony of making Mercy watch the prince choose someone else. But Mercy's eyes kept finding Adewole across the room. And his eyes kept finding her. The moment came. Prince Adewole stepped onto the raised platform, and the room fell silent. "Tonight, I want to talk about what makes a person truly noble," he began, his voice carrying across the hall. "For weeks, I've been told that status determines worth. That bloodline determines value. That a prince can only love a princess." He stepped down from the platform and began walking toward Mercy. "But I've learned something different. I've learned that nobility isn't about birth. It's about character. It's about kindness when you have nothing to gain. It's about grace under cruelty. It's about dreaming when the world tells you you're worthless." He stopped in front of Mercy. The entire room gasped. "Mercy Williams, you are the noblest person I've ever met. And I don't care what anyone says." He knelt before her, right there in front of Lagos's elite. "Will you stop?" Queen Judith's voice rang out like a bell. She swept forward, tears streaming down her face, and the room watched in stunned confusion as the Queen of Lagos fell to her knees beside her son, reaching for Mercy's hands. "Please," the Queen whispered. "Please forgive me. Your Majesty, I don't understand. 19 years ago, I gave birth to a daughter." Queen Judith's voice broke. "My family told me she died. But she didn't die. They took her and abandoned her at Pastor Michael's church. With this." She held up the golden locket. "This locket I gave to my child." Mercy's hand flew to her throat. "That's... Pastor Michael showed me that locket. He said it was with me when I was found. Because you are my daughter." The Queen was sobbing now. The DNA test confirmed it this morning. "Mercy, you're not an orphan. You're my child. Your Princess Mercy Adeyemi. Your Adewale's sister. The word sister echoed through the silent hall like thunder. Adewale had gone completely white. Mercy swayed on her feet. The entire room erupted in shocked whispers. All this time, Queen Judith continued, her voice raw with pain, you've been suffering while I lived in luxury, not knowing my own daughter was alive. You've been mocked and abused and called worthless when you're a princess by birth. Can you ever forgive me? Mercy couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The woman kneeling before her was her mother. The prince who'd shown her kindness was her brother. Adewale, his face stricken, looked at Mercy with devastated understanding. What he'd felt wasn't romantic love. It was something deeper, something his soul had recognized even when his mind didn't. The connection of blood, of family, of a brother who'd instinctively wanted to protect his sister. I felt it, he whispered. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it. Like you were supposed to be part of my life. Like I was supposed to protect you. Mrs. Gloria stood frozen in the crowd, her face ashen as she realized she'd been abusing a princess for 3 years. Blessing looked like she might faint. But Mercy only had eyes for the queen, for her mother, whose tears matched her own. You didn't know, Mercy finally whispered. How could you forgive yourself for something you didn't know? But you suffered. And now I'm found. Mercy's voice grew stronger. I spent 19 years believing I was nobody, that I had no family, no history, no worth. But I was never nobody, was I? I was always your daughter. I always mattered. The world just couldn't see it. Queen Judith pulled Mercy into her arms, and mother and daughter wept together while the stunned crowd watched. Adewale joined the embrace, and for the first time in her life, Mercy understood what it felt like to belong. Not because of what she'd gained, but because of what had always been true. She'd never been worthless. She'd never been unwanted. She'd just been lost. And now, finally, she was home. If Mercy's story touched your heart, it's because somewhere inside, you know this truth. Your worth was never determined by how others treated you. Like Mercy, you were always valuable. The world just hadn't recognized it yet. Don't let anyone make you feel worthless. Your story isn't over. Your crown is waiting. Subscribe to Folktales by Inoya for more stories. Hit that notification bell, so you won't miss another story. You matter. You always did.